So this is an introduction to the curriculum I've created for Black students who are post-Christian, multi-faith, or figuring it out. It's called Rest, a non-binary womanist mixtape manifesto. In her book, Making a Way Out of No Way, Monica Coleman posits that a womanist theology needs to address contemporary society and religious pluralism in an explicitly postmodern world. Coleman draws on the womanist tradition in African cosmology to introduce process theology as a functional theology. The womanist theological tradition places Black literature and the experiences of Black women as a foundational basis for theological reflection, and it presents a substantial ground for developing theology. And it's from that place that I worked on my own epistemological framework for navigating the world as a queer, non-binary post. This framework really helped as I tried to figure out what it meant to follow Jesus out of white Christianity, and landed in a place of rest that kept my personal agency and my intuition intact, but also lent itself to my pursuit and passion for mystery and transcendence. And so radical ethical spirituality grounded in tradition is a new epistemological framework for folks who are like me, non-binary, and trying to live in this world in a new type of way. So the framework really crystallized while I was at a conference for queer exiles of the Black church called Pride in the Pews. And it was the first time I was able to really actually name my non-binary and queer experience in the context of my desire to know and love God. And it was in that same setting only 10 years earlier where I had been doing campus ministry on the Atlanta University Center's campus. So it was a very full circle moment for me in thinking about how radical ethical spirituality needs to be grounded in tradition. And for me, the ethnographic tradition that grounds my spirituality is the Black church, and more particularly the Hush Harbor experience. And so in that space, I came to understand that tradition was not static or inherited, but it's dynamic and it's conjured by each generation. It blends the wisdom of the past with present realities, and it's within that creative tension, the act of conjuring, that we actually find ourselves or self-actualize. In that way, tradition is not just a legacy that's handed down through the ages, it's actively shaped and reimagined by us. It acts as a compass on our spiritual journey, and it offers hope and resilience that it ignites the imagination to think about what the future could be. And I think that this perspective on tradition cultivates harmony. I think it highlights our unique beauty and helps us integrate into a collective tapestry. I think that REST also confronts and deconstructs binaries just like me. And in the framework is a story called Me in the Color Purple that goes a little bit deeper into that. So the workshop, Womanist Epistemology Mixtape, it utilizes cultural texts as vehicles for philosophical and theological reflection. And the reason I'm calling it a mixtape is because while womanist theology is typically grounded in the experiences of Black women and Black literature, my experiences as a queer non-binary person, a lot of my stuff is informed by hip-hop culture in the ways that hip-hop speaks to me about the divine and life and the world. And so each of the sections has a collection of activities and reflections that steer the students and the participants towards embracing the soulful practices that are central to radical ethical spiritual tradition. So it's a series of 8 vocational workshops that are called tracks, and they offer a comprehensive journey through each of the themes. So each session's theme is anchored in the components that characterize the Hush Harbor, and the Hush Harbor context and framework concludes the learning journey. So it's a full circle type of experience. At the end and at the beginning, we advocate for the preservation of ethnographic tradition as a means of navigation and centering spiritual creativity, in a way that blends the past, the present, and the future with our authentic selves. We present the Hush Harbor as the context for conjure and tradition, or what Monica Coleman calls divine resource, and we do it sequentially. So each workshop contributes to a holistic examination of faith, identity, and community through a womanist lens, but it is broader because it's grounded in a non-binary perspective. We're hoping that that perspective really does enrich participants' understanding and practice of spirituality and hold space for different traditions and ways of being spiritual. So, track one, this session begins with a historical and spiritual significance of the Hush Harbor as this secret meeting place for enslaved Africans in the Americas, where they would go to practice their faith and spirituality authentically, with full freedom and free expression in a place that was communal and conjuring, and a place of belonging, but it was away from the white gaze or the oversight of their oppressive slaveholders. So we kind of talk about the Hush Harbor's role as a space of freedom, of resilience, and resistance. And the interactive activities explore how this tradition can serve as a metaphorical container for Black spirituality today. In the same way, radical ethical spirituality and tradition can foster communities of support, healing, and liberation. The cultural texts that we use throughout all 8 tracks are interdisciplinary, and they're meant to engage students in the epistemological process. So, for instance, track 1, the texts are a Vanity Fair article about Angela Davis that highlights her 50 years of embodying radicalness. And we use her perspective on radicalness to set forth a definition of radicality. We ask students to bring 5 sentences each from the reading, and then they watch a documentary about her life in order to pull out those themes that have characterized her journey from the FBI Most Wanted list to the cover of Vanity Fair. We present process theology in track 2, and we present it as a framework that views God and the world as interconnected and evolving, highlighting the relevance for understanding the dynamics of liberation and spiritual resilience. We think about how enslaved individuals converted Christianity to their truths, and in the same way the Hush Harbor context can create that for us. So in this section, students will explore the phrase, I am the resurrection and the life. What does it mean to be resurrection, and engaging in signs of life activities? We call it simply the signs of life activity. And it's a mindfulness activity that asks, where have you seen dead things come to life outside of the Easter story? When they journal, they're going to journal their reflections and insights in the Seeker app. The Seeker app was created and designed by Dr. Philip Butler, who is the author of Black Transhuman Liberation Theology. We touch on his work a little bit later in some of the tracks, but his app is Black AI with mental health capacities. And basically, it's a conversational artificial intelligence that is trained in psychotherapeutic frameworks. So the app itself focuses on health and fitness, and it offers features like conversation badges, connective energy gauge, and a weekly conversation graph. It's tailored to enhance the user's mental health through interaction. And so at the end of the process, at the end of the eight-week workshop, students will actually have a mind map of what the process was for them. And it gives them an opportunity to gauge and measure their spiritual experience and growth. We think that this introduces process theology in a really interesting way because it gives a visual conception of how the Spirit works in our lives. In track 3, The Way of Cain is Inhumane, we talk about what it means to be transhuman. So we draw upon some of Philip Butler's ideas. We explore the profound narrative of Cain and Abel, and we use their story as a lens to examine the dangers of jealousy, violence, and the devaluation of others. We use the biblical account to underscore the importance of embracing our individual limitations and uniqueness without undermining the values of others. It's really an exercise in shame and self-awareness, and the discussion serves as a foundational step towards challenging and dismantling binary perceptions as a tool of empire, because the tool of empire is to sort of assign value and judgment based on difference. We posit that these actions of assigning value based on difference they not only produce shame, but they're also a direct result of shame. They're rooted in a distorted belief about the divine. And so here we integrate Philip Butler's concepts again, thinking about sin as an organism. And we present it in the context of God telling Cain that sin is crouching like an organism. And so we're hoping that we help students see that by embracing a God who is vulnerable, that they can embrace their own vulnerability and perhaps reverse some of the damage, dysfunction, and dysregulation in the world. One of the ways that we do that is by connecting resurrection power and resurrection life to the abilities of our body. So we use this opportunity in this section to really get into polyvagal theory, how to help students understand their windows of tolerance. We do an activity where we have them learn about Brahmari breathing, which is a way to stimulate the vagus nerve, but it's also a way to calm ourselves when we are in hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So it's try to really help students think about ways to deal with dysregulation when they face what it means to be Black. And so the trauma that comes with that, the hypervigilance that comes with that, the experiences that come with that, we try to help them learn techniques that are already embedded in their body, what Dr. Butler calls biotech, Black biotech. How can we work with what's already happening in our body to create new neural pathways, to regulate ourselves? And one of the cool things we do is have the students listen to slave songs, particularly slave songs that include humming, to connect them to this practice of Brahmari, which is really about the vibration that affects our vagus nerve and calms us down. The other thing that we do is we use hip hop as a cultural text. And one of the things that we argue in the program is that self-actualization is actually a way to subvert empire. Because when empire confers identity onto you or attaches value to your identity apart from your own agency or intuition or connection with God, it becomes a tool for capitalism. And what we try to show, bringing in African cosmology's realities around apotheosis, which is really that people go on a journey towards self-actualization. And we sort of tell that through the narrative storytelling of hip-hop, again, because hip-hop is what has informed my own growth and change over the years. My favorite exercise in this section is called the bars activity, where students look at 5 bars from songs in the playlist that resonate with them, and they have to state why. But then they also have to find where the bars in these songs relate back to the concepts we've been covering and how. It teaches them how to synthesize ideas and make connections. One of the other things that we do is called the 2 people walk into a room parable. And this, again, is to stimulate understanding of our polyvagal system of fight and flight. And so we have students participate in a visualization exercise that has them think about what it would be like to walk into the room simultaneously with a stranger and the doors closed behind you. We use that to first have them see what it feels like to be activated, and then to kind of discover what does it mean to not run and not attack, but to open space to unfold, essentially. So then track 5 takes us into the poor you will always have among you. And this does speak to that reality of self-actualization and trans-colonialism, which is the ability to recognize good in the systems that exist. We need to think of a way for faith to be going forward, and technology is increasingly making us more and more invulnerable. So instead of attacking technology and technological growth and advancement, what we do is talk about the dangers of invulnerability. And we do that by telling stories, particularly through hip-hop narratives and films, about the dangers of invulnerability personally and in society. In track 6, it's called Heaven is Basically Freedom, and the learning activities are meant to show students how to engage in comparative theology. So we look at this passage in 1 Corinthians 15 that says that after the end comes, God is all in all, to demonstrate that even Christianity itself seems to lend itself towards a realization that's found in Hindu and Buddhist practices, where there's a recognition and a realization that God is all and in all. And so we have them watch this movie Kundun and kind of demonstrate what is it like to kind of put your religion in conversation with another religion, and it helps you to appreciate your own religion and tradition more. Tracks 7 and 8 are about we can all agree on wisdom. So it really does teach students how to live in a post-Christian, multi-faith world that is post-digital and advancing rapidly. So what we want to do, instead of resisting change, is help them to adapt to change, to be fluid and grounded at the same time, which is essentially a middle space, just like non-binariness. Track 8 is just about how do we implement some of these soulful practices, and they get to walk that out together. So that's a little bit about the REST framework and my final project. Thank you for listening.